Good afternoon, and we've got a special Wednesday night live here on Garland Nixon's YouTube show. We've got the one and only, my good friend and a great guy, all-around guy, Scott Ritter. Scott, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Well, there's been questions about our gigantic show. We had about 70,000 views so far with our Saturday show with Ray McGovern. Everyone loved it. It was a great show. Some questions have come about. We're going to talk to Scott, find out what's happening with Azovstal, and get some updates. And we're just going to have a fun time talking with Scott Ritter. Let's chat. Garland Nixon here. Before we get started, just some important housekeeping stuff. Even though old Scary Poppins and the Disinformation Governance Board they've gone the way of the dodo bird for now. We don't know what could happen at any given time with people who are on here trying to be honest and trying to give people an unbiased opinion. So in the comments, you will find my Rockfin channel. For those who can, please click on that, join my Rockfin channel, become a member, so that if any given day you wake up and all my videos are gone, they will be on Odyssey. They're all stored over there. But I'm on Rockfin regularly. I do all of this stuff on Rockfin and some other premium stuff. So please join Rockfin just in case the unspeakable happens. So great to have you back, Scott Ritter. I see you've been busy. I've seen you all over the place. You're a very busy man.
Well, I'm made more busy by you.
So let's start here. Before we get into, give us an update of the, as you see the battle theater, what's going on in the Donbass, particularly the Donbass, the cauldrons, throughout eastern Ukraine. Where do you see what's the state of the battle?
It's grinding forward. I mean, the bottom line is Russia is continuing to make progress on every facet of the front. There appears that a pocket cauldron, an encirclement, is in the process of taking place, if it hasn't already taken place, in Severodonetsk, that potentially has captured several thousand Ukrainian troops, and that's just a precursor to other pockets that are developing. The Russian strategy of grinding the Ukrainian forces down, achieving breakthroughs in desired axes of advance, and then using these axes to join together to entrap Ukrainians is working. It's working very well. The other part of the strategy is just to kill Ukrainians, and they're slaughtering them by the hundreds, if not thousands, every day. I mean, this is a very tragic reality of this conflict. On occasion, Ukraine does land a few blows. You can't expect to be in a heavyweight fight and not get punched, not get hit. But the scorecard is in an unbalanced fashion on the side of Russia. Russia is achieving the military objectives of the special military operation when it comes to denazification. We see this ongoing in Mariupol. With Azovstal, the surrender of hundreds of Azov thugs, along with Ukrainian soldiers, mercenaries, and we see demilitarization taking place with the ongoing destruction of the Ukrainian armed forces that are confronting Russia all along the front line in Donbass. So that's that. But as we discussed, this war has this war has entered into as a new character. There's an old saying that no plan survives initial contact with the enemy.
Mike Tyson, wasn't that what Mike Tyson meant when he said everyone's got a plan until he gets punched in the face?
Until he gets punched in the face, and then an adage to that is, or an extension of that is. The enemy always gets a vote, meaning that you can come up with what looks like the perfect plan on paper, but the enemy gets a vote. And in the case of Russia's special military operation, the enemy isn't just Ukraine. we've seen that NATO and the United States have become engaged in a significant way that wasn't a predictable at the beginning. Because remember, when this war started, both the United States and the NATO Secretary General said, we are not going to be a party to this conflict. You remember they said, we'll provide these light arms, but we're not going to give you aircraft. We're not going to give you heavy weapons because we don't want Russia to view us as an extension of this conflict. That has changed. Today, Ukraine is being provided with significant quantities of heavy weaponry, including aircraft, including tanks, artillery, etc. The United States alone has provided, since the beginning of this conflict, some $53 billion worth of weaponry, or is preparing to provide. And what's important that is we're in May. We're basically a third of the way through the year, and the United States has already provided Ukraine with military assistance and a dollar amount that exceeds the entire defense budget of the Russian military for a year. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that when you inject this much military, hardware and capability into a problem, you will affect it. You will influence this. And one of the ways this is influenced is that Ukraine now has what I call strategic depth that they didn't have at the beginning of this conflict. When the conflict began, Ukraine had to train in facilities in Western Ukraine that could be bombed. And we saw that early on in Liverov when cruise missiles struck, a camp that was being used by the International Legion, the mercenaries, and, scores were killed. We've seen that with the ongoing destruction of warehouses where equipment is brought in, stored, and is being destroyed. But what Russia can't strike are the training grounds in Poland and in Germany. They can't strike the airfields that are in Germany and Poland where this equipment is brought in. They can't strike the rail lines that connect Europe with Germany and Poland to bring this equipment in. And they can't interdict the bases where thousands of Ukrainian soldiers are currently stationed in Poland and Germany, receiving hands-on training from NATO instructors, not mercenaries, not civilians, not contractors, actual NATO personnel on how to use this equipment, how to employ it in combat for the sole purpose of killing Russians. That's what's going on here. Now, I believe I had believed that Russia. Well, I know that Russia can't strike these targets. I had sufficient faith in the Russian intelligence service that they would be able to detect this material as it comes in and interdict it. And they have done that for some of this. But we saw, for instance, just today, that Ukraine is using those American howitzers. They had a battery of American howitzers on the front line, using them against the Russians. Now, these howitzers were subsequently destroyed by Russia. That's the fate of anything that reaches the front line. But the important thing is that it made it to the front line, which means Russia had to destroy it, which means Russia had to destroy something that didn't previously exist. And as long as this material keeps coming in, Russia is going to have to destroy it, which means that this conflict has become more complicated, that the conflict is no longer dictated solely by Russia's ability to destroy Ukrainian armed forces on the front line, but also by Ukraine's ability to receive new material, new trained troops, reconstitute forces. So when we speak of demilitarization, one of the stated objectives of Russia, you can't demilitarize if the enemy keeps reconstituting. You demilitarize when you destroy that which exists. But when you destroy that which exists, but the enemy keeps popping up new units with new equipment, sometimes better equipment, you're not demilitarizing. You're basically like a hamster in a wheel spinning. And remember, this is a hamster that is also suffering casualties. The Russians, the war is a deadly business. And the longer the war goes on, the more Russians are being killed, the more Russians are being wounded, the more Russian equipment is being damaged or destroyed. This is an inevitability of war. It doesn't mean Russia's losing. It means Russia's at war. And when Russia starts with 200,000 troops, at some point in time either have to replace that which has been killed, wounded, taken prisoner, damaged, destroyed, or deal with a smaller level of capability. So let's say you take out 20,000 troops. I'm making this number up. I'm not saying that's what the casualty level is. I'm just throwing that out there. That means instead of planning a war for 200,000, you now have to do the same tasks with 180,000. And if you don't think 20,000 men make a difference in war, you don't know anything about war. And this is what's happening to Russia. So they're winning. They're going to win in Donbass. There's no doubting that. The question now comes, though, when they achieve that victory, under the old special military operation way of thinking, you would have destroyed the Ukrainian military, make the political government in Kiev vulnerable, and it would have been very likely they would have appealed for a surrender on terms. Those terms probably would have included permanent neutrality for Ukraine and legislation that outlawed, Ukrainian ultranationalism. There you got Russia just won. Demilitarization, denazification, and permanent neutrality. No NATO. That's a victory. Now, when Russia takes over the East, you have a Ukraine that's getting tens of billions of dollars worth of weaponry, reconstituting its army. So you no longer have demilitarization. Ukraine's going to continue to fight. The war ain't over. The Ukrainian government isn't about to surrender, so you haven't achieved your objective of getting, a neutral Ukraine. Ukraine is a de facto proxy of NATO. They're the sword of NATO. And denazification, even though you're capturing thousands of or killing thousands of Azov regiment people in Mariupol, they still are fighting in Kharkov. They still exist in Kiev. They still exist in Lvov. So Russia can achieve all of the stated military objectives of the special military operation and have failed to accomplish the meaningful military and political objectives it set out. Is that a victory? No, it's not a victory. Under no circumstances could you call this a victory. A victory is what Russia said they wanted to achieve: demilitarization, denazification, permanent neutrality. And it's not just that. This Ukrainian operation was supposed to create the conditions and circumstances that compelled NATO into recognizing the absolute need for a new European security framework along the lines of the draft treaties that were submitted by Russia in December of 2021. Right now, NATO's not even close to conceding this. In fact, NATO's going the opposite, trying to invite Finland and Sweden into its ranks to continue the eastward expansion of NATO. So if Russia continues to pursue this conflict with the limited resources allocated, I don't see how they win. Oh, that doesn't mean they're going to lose in the Donbass. People go, oh, that means you think Russia's going to lose. No. Russia loses, though, by not winning.
Yeah, I know what you mean. To win a war, actually, it technically is when a country sets forth a political objective, and the political objective is achieved through the use of arms. So what you're
Right.
saying is you can win the war, but if you have a political objective and you have not achieved that political objective, you've won on the ground, but you haven't achieved what you set forth to achieve. Now, let me ask you this: a couple of things I want to throw at you, and that is this. A couple of different things, but let's start with this. I think this is an important one. About in the last week or so, there were a couple of instances where in Kiev, some of the wives and a couple of other places, some of the wives of some of these soldiers started to protest. They were not happy. They were saying, "You're sending our husbands and sons, etc., down here into a meat grinder, and they're not properly armed," or whatever the case may be. Okay. It's easy to say they're just going to keep throwing men at the Russians, throwing them into what? You run out of men. Here's the thing about it. At some point, and when you see the kind of numbers that are the kind of numbers that are of troops that are being lost in the East, at some point, some of these towns and cities through in the West, the women and children, et cetera, are going to say, okay, when are our fathers and sons coming home? And the government's going to say they're not. Well, some of them, nope. none of the fathers, none of the sons in this town. You're going to have entire regions where generations of young and middle-aged men are wiped out. And there's the people in the region have to be dedicated to the cause to say, we're willing to keep taking this punishment. So the question is, the West can say that. The government can say, we're going to keep throwing men at you. But with what happened at Azovstal, which certainly will affect, I don't know if it will, but it could affect morale. With what let's say the conclusion of the Donbass with unthinkable, I mean, literally generational issues of wiping out. How does that affect the government / proxy war and the ability to continue, because war is about morale, to keep getting people and saying, here's a gun, run out into that meat grinder and do what all of your fathers and brothers before you did. Next up, before people start saying, I ain't going to do it, or before you start getting some serious pushback from the women and children at home that are just seeing everybody get wiped out and they don't even want to know what for. Scott.
It's important. It's an important point. And it's a reality that exists. We can't deny that there have been protests. We can't deny that some Ukrainian military units have in effect rebelled from being sent to the front because they feel that they're unprepared, they're under equipped, they're poorly led, that this would be suicide. And some units have gone to the front, got slaughtered, and the survivors have come back and refusing to go back to the front. We know this is happening. It's a huge problem for the Ukrainians. But here's the thing. If you're a Russian general and you're counting, in order to achieve victory, you need the Ukrainian women to rise up. You got a bad plan, man, because you can't control that. That's not a controllable thing. What Russia's doing right now is I liken it to like a casino. When you go into a casino, the odds are against you. You're going to lose. If I take $100,000 into the casino and I stay at the casino, eventually all that money is going to belong to the casino. Eventually. But what happens if the casino has limited resources? And I'm calling Russia the casino, because Russia right now is in control of a situation where the odds are 100% in their favor, meaning that the longer this goes on, the more inevitable a Russian victory becomes, unless the casino has limited resources. And now, if I'm playing the casino, I will put money down, lose, I'll double down and add. So that if I win, I make money. I lose, I double down and add. And if I keep putting enough resources on there, odds are eventually I'm going to win, and the house can't cover it. The house is going to lose. This is what happens when Russia sticks with 200,000 men. Because now you're in a competition of resources. And the question is, who's going to fold first? Now, if Russia were to escalate and increase the amount of resources, there's no way Ukraine can win. But when Ukraine is looking at a situation where at least the perception is that Russia is strained, that allows people maybe to hold on to the hope of victory, that if they just grind it out. And sometimes when you've suffered so many losses, it becomes harder to disengage as a nation. And we may have reached that point where Ukraine has suffered so egregiously that it's politically impossible for Ukraine to back out. I'll give you an example. In 1914, the Russians fought a big battle in Tannenberg in Prussia. And the two Russian armies were annihilated, huge losses. But did Russia fold? No. The Russian people absorbed the loss, allowed a new mobilization to take place, and continued the fight. They weren't ready to quit. Now they folded years later when they reached a culminating point. But I don't think, because we've seen some demonstrations in the street, that the Ukrainian people have reached that culminating point. And I think that the danger for Russia is to continue to allow this casino to operate in an underfunded status. they need to increase the resources of the House so that the House can absorb whatever bet the other side puts on the table.
So now the discussion is the Donbass, and I think there's little question what's going to happen here. The Russians have overpowered. So at some point, with these cauldrons and encirclements, only one or two things are happening. Either these soldiers are going to get annihilated, and of course, you and I both would, would hope that they would, surrender and preserve their lives, as many lives as possible. Certainly, not the Nazis, but the rest of the guys. Certainly, from my perspective. So my question is this: what do you think? Because that's the big question. Once this is happens, how does it affect I mean, if you're part of the other pockets now, because you're looking at more like pockets throughout the East, what are you thinking? There's no reinforcements coming. There's no, the reinforcements of any kind now are probably not coming. And where do you see the Russians doing next? And they can engage, they don't have to, because the way they're doing it, they're going to completely take and own that turf behind them. They're not going to have to leave a lot of fighters behind. It's going to be a rebuilding process for the area. They got that. And I don't suspect they're ever giving up an inch of it, but they can now take all of those resources. What happens after Donbass? What do you think happens next? And I understand you're just guessing, but as a professional man.
Well, first of all, we need to understand the Russians are extraordinarily legalistic in how they operate. They're not as footloose and fancy free with the law as the United States. Meaning,
he was a lawyer. He's a lawyer.
But he's also, I think Putin respects the Russian Constitution far more than people give him credit for, and Putin respects the role of the Duma far more than people give him credit for. And there's a reason why it's called a special military operation, because that has specific legal consequences and limitations. It's not general war. It's being fought specifically to liberate the Donbass. That's the stated military objective. They've added to that the security of Crimea and the Donbass by creating a land bridge that connects Crimea with the Donbass and expands Crimea into the Kherson region for water security. A lot of people don't realize that prior to this, the Ukrainians had shut off the water supply of fresh water to Crimea, and there was a huge water crisis. And so one of the objectives of this was to alleviate that water crisis, to seize control of the source of water so that the Crimeans will never again be denied water by the Ukrainians. Russia has achieved that objective. Once they finalize the victory, right now Russia has some latitude from under the special military operation to strike in areas outside of the Donbass because it influences the battle inside the Donbass. But once the battle of the Donbass is decided and Russia has won, the special military operation is over. And in order for Russia to move beyond that, Putin was going to have to redefine this operation. Either he has to go to the Duma and restate a new special military operation, or he's going to have to go and get a declaration of war. The problem with restating a new special military operation is that Russia has made it a point to conduct this operation within the limitations of peacetime manning. So there is no emergency mobilization. There is no large-scale mobilization reserves. This is using the available manpower, and there is a finite quality to that, especially if this peacetime manning level is going to be further stressed by Finland and Sweden joining NATO. Even if Russia doesn't attack Finland, and right now Putin is indicating that that's not his preference, that he's willing to accept a Finland and Sweden in NATO as long as they don't alter the material balance in the region. I mean, if
Yeah,
they keep the
I think that's the key, because I've read some of the things he said, and it seemed to imply, yeah, as long as you don't start loading this country up with
right,
missile launchers and things, So he seemed to have left himself an out there.
but he's still going to, I believe, deploy troops to the border under any circumstance. So, because Putin doesn't bluff, we've learned that, and even though he doesn't want to go to war, he needs to be prepared to go to war, which means that's additional strain on peacetime manning. And so, while this is happening, to have the special military operation expand into a new phase that, for instance, might include taking Odessa, that might include taking Kharkov, that might include expanding the Donbass region into other eastern Ukrainian territories that reach further into the heart of Ukraine. This is just asking too much of too limited resources, and so Russia will be constrained by the amount of military power it's willing to put on the table. At some point in time, I believe Russia will either have to radically redefine what victory is, meaning that then instead of Zelensky surrendering and perpetual neutrality and all this stuff, a victory parade through Kiev, they will have to accept that they own, the Donbass and Crimea, expanded Crimea belongs to Russia, and that's it. That's a defeat for Russia. That would be a strategic defeat for Russia, and I don't think Putin's in the business of being strategically defeated. But to change that, I think he will have to do some form of general mobilization, which will require the Russian parliament to give him additional powers, wartime powers, whether they want to make it a formal war or if they want to expand the scope and scale of the special military operation. But there's going to have to be some change in the means by which Russia seeks to achieve the stated objectives. And according to Lavrov, Russia hasn't changed its objectives. He says we're going to accomplish everything we set out to do, which is a noble position. But at some point in time, I close my eyes and I just let the scene play out, and I see finite Russian resources, and I see almost infinite NATO resources being poured in. I mean, again, it's mind-boggling to think that in 4 months, NATO has provided 1 year's worth of Russian defense spending for the whole Russian military, only for Ukraine.
Let me ask you about that, Scott, because one of the questions that people, and it's a question that I have in my mind, and you've been around the mill. When you look at the kind of numbers of, go to Vietnam, we poured unthinkable numbers in there. And of course, that it didn't work out. And Afghanistan, I mean, we left billions in there. We spent, so what happens is, to some extent, these military ventures become money laundering operations. And you get a lot of people making a lot of money, and a lot of that money, the greater part of it, never makes it into the battle theater, and we end up losing a war to a bunch of guys in 2004 Toyota trucks all too often. That has been the history. So don't you have to take into account the corruption, the inherent official corruption, in that the money's going to Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and all this overprice? So, how much do you have to take it into account? And add this. And you and I both know, being trained in weapons and things of that nature, I heard that you went to Anniston, Alabama, to the I was at the same thing, to the base there at Anniston, Alabama. I went to that training also.
Cobra.
WMD training. But we didn't walk through the big tanks with the VX gas and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay. All right.
But that was pretty interesting. Did you see the big chair in Anniston? They had a giant chair, the biggest chair in the world. That was supposedly their big draw. But at any rate, I digress.
Was that in the town? They didn't let us into the town. They didn't let us into the town.
Yeah, yeah. We went up.
We
Well,
were,
we
we
got
were, we were, we were chained to the base.
okay. Yeah, I got a tour through the town. But at any rate, my point being, the issue of corruption, the issue of weapons are all good and fine, but in modern warfare, weapon you just don't just hand a person a weapon and they fire it and they win the war. You know what I mean? And combine this
Yeah.
is very highly technical warfare with mathematical formulas and air cover and all of these things. And you can have inferior weapons with a superior fighting force and a better trained fighting force, and you're going to win. So how do you factor in some of these weapons are new, some of them are untested, a lot of the people don't know how to use them, there's going to be a corruption, there's a lot of things to factor in here that are not going to work on behalf of NATO just throwing money and weapons again at a problem and thinking that gives you a victory, because I have yet to see that happen.
No, and these are all fair points. First of all, let's understand that when we say talking purely dollar amounts, to say $53 billion versus, Russia's $48 billion annual. Well, the Russian military budget is being done in a systemic, planned fashion that is designed for maximum efficiency. The $53 billion, on the other hand, there's nothing efficient about it. It's being rushed through. So we have to spend a lot more money to get reduced impact. I mean, there's a lot of waste, fraud, abuse, corruption, etc. So even though it's 53 billion, it's not really 53 billion. It's maybe even half that. That's
Yeah,
still
some of it is going to build up. Some of it is going to build up Eastern European other militaries, and I mean, it's all over the place.
It's all over the place.
Yeah.
But now, early on when NATO first started providing this equipment, there was a rushed aspect to it. Rushed training. Train the trainer was the thing. We trained a handful of Ukrainians who then bring it into Ukraine and train their counterparts. That's shifted, because by bringing them in and training their counterparts, they're getting wiped out by the Russians. So now all the training's taking place in Poland and in Germany. And because of the willingness of Ukraine to sacrifice lives for time, these troops are getting more detailed training, more hands-on training. They're getting training that actually replicates the kind of training that we would give American troops or NATO troops on handheld equipment, which means that Ukrainian operators now have a level of competence that they didn't have previously. So this is also, adds to the, to the value. So there's a trade-off here, but, at the end of the day, as long as Ukraine is willing to sacrifice lives for time, the time that is being spent is building a more capable Ukrainian army. And now what we've also found out is that the United States, and I believe I know how they're doing it, and I'm not going to say how I think they're doing it, because I'm not here to get Americans killed. But we have created, using very professional people and very good intelligence, we have found seams in the Russian coverage that we're exploiting to get this equipment into Ukraine. We're being very successful with this. Not 100%. We've seen the warehouses blow up. We know that they do get hit. But we've also seen the Russians allowing things. For instance, Poland has sent in over 1,000 rail cars full of refined petroleum products to compensate for the Russian destruction of Ukrainian refineries and oil and gasoline storage areas. I mean, if you talked to me a month ago, I would have said the same thing I said to you a month ago. A tank without gas is a coffin. But guess what's happening right now? The Ukrainians are driving everywhere. They got gas. It's not coming from their own refineries because they've been blown up. It's not coming from their traditional stockpiles because they've been blown up. It's coming in from Poland on rail cars. And then it's being disseminated using rat lines that the United States and Britain have created based upon really good intelligence about Russian coverage. And so they found the seams, they're exploiting the seams, and they're getting in. Now, it's not a game changer. Nothing's going to alter what's happening in eastern Ukraine. Nothing is. But remember, you lose by not winning. And what's happening here is that Russia's not winning. The big picture, the political
objectives, yeah.
They're winning the military objective in Donbass, impressively so. But you can't talk about demilitarization when for every brigade you destroy on the Eastern Front, which should be irreplaceable, a new brigade comes in with better equipment, better training, and is able to function because they have gas. This is a battle of resources. It's a battle of will, and it's a battle where, unless Ukrainian will collapses, time is on Ukraine's side. That the longer this goes on, the harder it's going to be for Russia to achieve the political objective that it wants, given the limited resources that they've committed to this fight. So, even though NATO is doing isn't, early on, a lot of this was just knee jerk. Oh God, we need something. 200 M113s. Send them now. 200 T-72s from Poland. Send them now. This rushed aspect. What I see happening though is NATO's calming down. They're calming down. They've built infrastructure. Again, the strategic depth that Ukraine now has in Poland and Germany is a game changer. It doesn't mean it's a game winner. A lot of people go, "Oh, you game changer, you flip-flopped." No, I'm just saying that there are new fact sets available today that weren't available before. This is a game changer. This is like having, a rookie quarterback on your starting football team, and he gets hurt, and you replace him with Tom Brady. It's a game changer. You just change the dynamic of the game. It doesn't mean you're going to win the game, but it means your opponent now has to deal with something they weren't dealing with previously. And Russia now has to deal with a strategic depth to Ukraine that they didn't have to deal with for the first 2 months of this conflict. They have to deal with a more measured, professional approach of NATO to train and equip the Ukrainian forces that didn't exist. Where in the past, they used to rush equipment in that the Ukrainians couldn't maintain, weren't trained to maintain, didn't have the ability to maintain. They're now training the Ukrainians to maintain it, and they're giving them the ability to bring the sustainment into Ukraine. Now, when they get on the battlefield, they die. That's just the reality of it. But they're getting better, and they sometimes have an impact. We already see that with Russia's reduced capability, that Russia had to thin out the battle lines in Kharkiv, north of Kharkiv, to get sufficient troops down to be able to sustain the pocket generating pressure on the Eastern Front. Now, that's not the end of the war. Military forces always thin out lines that aren't important. They withdraw, et cetera. But the point is, Ukraine, this far into the war, still has the ability to generate forces capable of offensive military action. They couldn't do this a month ago. They could not do this a month ago. There were no significant counterattacks by the Ukrainians a month ago. Now there are brigade-sized maneuver forces using combined arms warfare, as a real army does. How come Ukraine still has a real army that has gas to fuel its vehicles, that has modern artillery with counter battery radar functioning? Why? Because it's being rebuilt by NATO as we speak. Russia's already destroyed many of those forces in the north. They don't live long against Russia. Even against a thinned out Russian force, Russia finds them, fixes them, and then there's the final F, destroys them. And that's just what's happening. They're not winning.
All right. One other thing
I want to is still going on. I mean, it's not ending.
One more thing I think this, because I know it's night and late at night. I don't want to take up all your time, but this is important. Now, you got two sides here, and you got time. The other part is the political economic war. There's a kind of, you might call it a war of attrition going on the battlefield, which, needless to say, they can throw stuff on there into the battle theater and Russia can destroy it. The question is how long can they keep throwing things into the theater, and can they do that effectively for how long, and et cetera? Can they increase their effectiveness, et cetera? Now, here's the question from the other side. I've read a number of places that Mario Draghi from Italy was talking to the Biden administration, saying we need a negotiated settlement, that there are cracks, shall we say, in the EU and NATO. There are leaders saying we need a negotiated settlement. And what's going on is the numbers, the economic numbers, due to blowback from the economic war of attrition, are, I put it like this: it's the equivalent of what's happening to the Donbass, the troops in the Donbass in a cauldron. The leaders in Europe are in an economic cauldron, and I'm seeing the numbers in Germany were first unbelievable numbers, and the Russians have got to win. We're supporting the war, giving more troops. Those numbers are start to get going to 50. Bottom line is the numbers all over Europe are starting to go down. You can't maintain a war if people don't have bread, if people are saying, I can't pay the bills. And now people are starting to say, the leaders in Joe Biden, which I'm looking at it now, I don't see how any of these their parliamentary systems on any given Tuesday, any one of them can drop. I don't see how any of these governments throughout Europe, other than say Hungary or a couple of places like that, can stand. How can the Biden administration hold together their political coalition under the kind of economic pressures that these people are getting? And you're seeing it start to happen here with the gas prices, et cetera, at home. People are hitting the ceiling over this $40 billion. That's not going over good at all. And let me just say this, Scott, I'll say this. I'm in a Black community. People who said to me, Garland, you got to vote for Biden. And me, I'm like, oh, I'm not voting for it. Are you kidding me? You think I'm voting for this guy? Not happening. Oh, you've got to do the right thing and stop Trump. These are Black people who vote, vote reliably for Democrats, are saying to me, yeah, I'm sorry. I've had people say to me the words I never thought I'd hear in a Black community. We were probably better off under Trump. When you hear that, the Democrats are in very serious trouble. So how long can politically, because, we talk about the Russians' time. The economic numbers are horrifying okay, so talk about that, Scott. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I mean, let's just boil it down to as simple an equation as possible. I'll call it the price of diesel gasoline, or the diesel fuel. All right. That's the whole story. I mean, yes, we can talk about natural gas and, but the bottom line is, look at why the U.S. market tanked today. It tanked today because Walmart and Amazon and others can't afford to do business. They're going, we can't, it's not about we can't stay in business, because it's all about supply chain. It's all about, America and Europe has operated on a razor thin margin of economic efficiency. There is no fat, there is no depth, there is no reserve. It's about bringing stuff in and getting it to the market in the quantities necessary to meet immediate demand. And then if demand raises, you can get more in. If demand diminishes, you bring in less. But it's all this finely tuned stuff that is married to truckers on the road. That's what makes America work. That's what gets our food from California to New York. That's what gets the goods from Long Beach, California to Ohio. Truckers. And truckers operate with one thing: diesel. That's it. And when truckers have to start paying the prices they're paying and what they're going to be paying, because diesel is going to go through the roof.
I'm hearing rationing's coming. I'm hearing they're going to be rationing soon.
Right, but still with rationing, by rationing they say the government now is going to subsidize diesel fuel. We're going to ration it, but subsidize it so the truckers who win the coupon only have to pay $2 a gallon. Because unless you do that, it doesn't matter if the trucker's paying $7, $8, $9, $10 a gallon for diesel, which is where the direction we're heading. the economy stops. It ceases to function because you know what? Walmart's not in the business of benevolency. They're not here to be nice to the American people. They pretend to be, but they're here to make money, lots of money. And right now, they're not making any money. They're breaking even. And if the fuel prices go up, they're going to be losing money. And you know what happens to a business when it loses money? It shuts down. It's done. Sometimes it goes away forever. So this is what's happening. And it's happening in Europe too, because Europe operates under the same concept. Diesel is the backbreaker, just like natural gas is. I mean, right now they're playing games with natural gas where the U.S. is in effect subsidizing it. I mean, but what Europe needs to understand is they just passed this fancy 210 billion euro, energy plan on how to deal with decoupling ourselves from Russia. Wonderful plan. We got this great thing, big arrows, lots of PowerPoints, boom, 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 boom. And what they don't say in there is what happens to the plan when the U.S. stops underwriting, subsidizing, and you got to pay market price. Because you want to know why the price of gas is so cheap? Because Russia was selling it to you cheaply, because Russia had an easy way of getting it to you. But now you're going to be dealing in a market where Russian gas is going to have a harder time getting to China until they build a new pipeline, et cetera. So there's going to be increased demand on the gas, especially since everybody is now trying to transition to natural gas to meet their ecological climate change requirements. So with all that demand, what happens to the price? Through the roof. So at the same time that Europe's going to be dealing with diesel prices and the cost of everything going insane, suddenly they're going to be hit with a gas bill in 2 years or 3 years that's going to be 3 or 4 times what they're paying. And it's going to come out that quick. And it's instantaneous. It's like you and I receiving our energy bill. I don't know what you pay per month, but let's say hypothetically speaking, I pay $250 a month. My wife will tell me I'm high. I would probably pay more than that, but that's what we pay. That's like all of a sudden 1 month, get $1,000 bill. And I go, "What do you mean $1,000?" They go, "Wait till next month."
Right.
And I go, "Next month it's 2,000."
I'm reading a thing, Scott, that's saying that by next winter, that in a lot of European countries, that basically people will not, the average person won't make enough money to pay for food and fuel. Just those two things. Forget about those two things. So the issue of time, there's the time on the bat, and how long can you keep pumping money? Yeah, we're going to give another 40 billion, 500 million, whatever. And the people at home are saying, whoa, we're hungry and we're cold. And there's one other factor that I think is of great consequence. And you're loaded with 6 million refugees, and they're hungry and they need a place to stay. I mean, I think that, yes, Russia is facing some issues in that they're pumping money in, but I think Europe has some existential issues outside that, not on the battlefield, that can basically wipe out any of these government. Some of these governments, I think, are just going to drop like that. They're going to face no confidence votes and shut down when some of these numbers come in. And how do they continue to push this thing?
It again, when I close my eyes and I run it forward and fast forward the movie, I don't see them sustain. I see nothing but economic doom and gloom and collapse. But again, I put on my military hat, and I just have to say that if I'm a military officer and I tell Putin that my strategy for victory depends on the economic demise of Europe, I should be fired on the spot.
Right.
It probably will happen. Europe probably won't. But the other thing I know about the economy is that it's so complex, and there can be so many cheats and so many that, I believe Europe is fully capable of playing games, little card games, shell games during the summer to artificially keep the economy going. They can play games with subsidies and all that. The real crunch will come in the wintertime when they fail to fill up their gas reserves. They have no gas, and people start to freeze to death and all that. But, can Russia sustain this through the winter with 200,000 men? That's what I mean. This is a time issue. Look, Europe's in a lot of trouble. I said this going in, that their economic sanctions will backfire, that Europe will lose this because of economic sanctions. But I never anticipated, and I don't think anybody did. Find me one person that said, my bingo card says that in May of 2022, the United States is going to pass a new Lend-Lease bill for Ukraine, and a bill for $40 billion in military assistance is going to be passed by the United States Senate and go on Biden's desk. There's not a single person with any integrity who will tell you, I saw that coming. No one saw that coming. It changed the game. It doesn't mean that it altered the outcome, but it changed the game, and it has to be considered going forward. The same thing with the economy. I mean, this is Europe is look, there's a lot of factors here. One, why does Russia continue to sell gas to Europe at this point?
Yeah, that's the question I keep saying, because at any given day, Russia, Europe is playing with someone. I'm playing with you, knowing that you got a handful of aces. That I'm just hoping or taking for granted that you won't drop them on any given Monday. The Russians could say, you know what, we've had enough of you guys. You're going back to the Stone Ages starting tomorrow. We're shutting off the gas, and they don't have electricity. They're back in the Stone Ages. They're living off of, you know what? Talk about cauldrons. They'll be cooking in cauldrons under a wood fire.
Yeah, no, I mean, now I know that Russia has maintained the position that they will not use energy as a weapon. And here's the important thing we have to remember, that if Russia uses energy as a weapon against Europe, all of their future customers will think that so Russia has to play it clean, and they're doing that. But when we're talking about
too far, how about you? But
when we're talking about survival, I mean, at some point in time, the short-term interests are going to come in. Germany, again, I think the Germans understand that Russia literally has a straight-edge razor on their throat. And anytime Russia wants, they can just go, whoop, and Germany dies instantly, economically. Russia's not. Russia is throwing lifelines out there like you wouldn't believe. Russia's keeping Europe afloat. Russia is doing Europe a huge favor by doing themselves a favor, too, by maintaining the reality that Russia, if you buy energy from Russia, you contract it, Russia will provide you the energy. That's Russia's thing. And everybody knows that. But again, as bad as things are in Europe right now, Russia could shut her down right now. Just shut her down. Shut it all down and end it tomorrow. But the long-term harm that would do to Russia as a provider of energy, and that still is Russia's big economic card. That could hurt Russia more than it helps Russia short term. So I think that's one of the reasons why Russia is letting this thing play out, because it's bad for Europe. Russia doesn't have to shut her down, but Russia could. These debates, discussions, everything could end tomorrow. Europe will be in the Stone Age if Russia just shut all the energy down, because there's nothing right now to replace it. Even this great replacement plan that Europe's talking about, they're talking about 2024 before they
can. That's not realistic.
That's not even realistic. Of course not. It's based on a lot of assumptions and all this. It doesn't take into account, for instance, the price of diesel fuel and the hyperinflation that's going to occur when the price of everything goes through the roof and salaries don't increase. I mean, we're already feeling it here at home. I get X amount of money. Every month, the government doesn't go, Scott, you get X plus 7.8% because of the inflation.
Right.
That's 7.8% every month. And now, so in 2 months from now, it's 40. Pretty soon, my money's not going to be worth anything. My paycheck's not going to be able to buy anything. I mean, we're already talking about, can we afford to go down to New York City? We used to drive down to New York City a lot just to enjoy a weekend there. You always have to understand hotels are expensive there, food's expensive. But the price of gas is a killer.
Hey, I've got an RV. You imagine pulling that thing around? You know what I mean? I mean, just think of, those kinds of things that people do for recreation, and the price has even gone up. So there's just, I guess what we're saying, Scott, is on both sides, there's a number of restrictive and unpredictable factors that at any given time, the pressure could get. I put it like this. You've clearly, I think, articulated the Russians' issues that they have to be concerned about. On the other side, let's face it, there's no NATO. This is an umbrella organization for the U.S. so they can have power of attorney for Europe, if we're honest. Okay, holding that coalition together in the face of unthinkable economic disaster is going to be no easy job for Joe Biden, a guy who, let's be honest, he ain't up to the job by any stretch. This guy's shaking hands with the invisible man.
Impossible task.
Yeah.
It's difficult it would be difficult for a competent president with an outstanding cabinet. It's impossible for Joe Biden and one of the worst cabinets in modern history.
Well, thanks a lot, Scott. I really appreciate you coming on, taking your time up, and we've been here for almost an hour here this time of night, and I appreciate it, man. And you do a great job, and you're an honest guy, and you give us, I think, an unbiased insight, because everybody wants to, whatever side they are, they want to hear the good news, and I think you give a very unbiased insight, and I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right, man. Well, I'll talk to you again soon. Keep in touch.
Okay.
All right, the one and only Scott Ritter. Before I go, let's see if we've got some super chats. That's important. We got some super. Oh, I saw one. And Iris, God knows I'm. Inamorado says, in Donbass, Ukrainian soldiers don't want to fight any longer. A lot surrendered today. I think that's going to be an issue. I agree with you, Iris. That is going to be an issue. There are a lot of soldiers, the issue of morale, and a lot of soldiers that are going to be facing, disastrous fire from artillery, etc. I think they're going to have some real problems with holding that together. And after this Donbass operation ends, a lot of the other soldiers in the military, I think, are going to be looking over their shoulders, saying there's nobody to bring. There's no extra anybody coming. There's no extra soldiers, no extra ammunition, etc. So I do think they're going to have a big problem after they lose this. There's some more out. I know. I saw some colorful. Oh, here's one. Here we go. Optimist Princess says, Princeps, what happened to Finland if Turkey vetoes its NATO bid? That is a tremendous loss for NATO, period. And Finland will have made a horrific mistake, because Finland benefits from having a reasonable economic relationship with Russia, and having a fairly, a neutral military relationship with Russia. And they're throwing it all out the window. If they don't get in, they got big problems. Keep in mind, there's other countries. Turkey's not the only country. I suspect, knowing Erdogan, I would suspect that Erdogan is bargaining for what he can get. So, I'm no big fan of Erdogan. I know how he plays the game. And I just think he's going to get all that he can. And other countries are going to follow suit, and they're going to say, if you're going to help us, if you want us to vote for that, you're going to have to pay. So I think that Erdogan has started something that's going to continue, wherein some of the smaller countries that are having economic problems, they know good and darn well that the U.S. wants this bad, and they're going to start extorting the U.S. So Finland could still make it in. I would guess. Yes, they probably do. That could be a bad situation. We'll keep an eye on that. Let's see what Andrei Volkov says. Ukraine is not the end of the story. NATO will try to weaken Russia someplace else after Ukraine is defeated. If Russia throws in everything now, it might not be able to withstand the larger conflict economically. See, that's where I agree. Here's what I think, Andrei, because this is the way I think. And working around Russians, knowing a lot of Russians. Remember, my mentor was Paul Robeson Jr., a guy who went to school in the Soviet Union, who very much understood Russian culture, right? The Russians are very cautious, measure 1,000 times, cut once. So I suspect that one of the things you're seeing with the Russian military is this. Look, they don't think they're going to have to engage with NATO. But if by some, unfortunate reason they do, they want to have the resources to do it. So I think one of the things that Russia is doing is holding back a hell of a lot of resources, so that if they do feel, if they get attacked by NATO, if they have to engage with NATO forces, that they'll have the full force of their military to do it. I think that is something that Andre, you are correct on that one. That's a great comment. Let's see. Let's look for another. And if you have other, just do a super chat, and we will answer that. We've also got some people over there on Rockfin. Don't forget, everyone, join my Rockfin channel, rockfin.com/Garland Nixon, because I'm on there and they could toss me off here anytime. Also, on Rockfin, I do my COVID stuff. I do is all premium, which means you have to pay the $9.99 a month, but that's just not for my channel. On Rockfin, if you pay $9.99 a month, you can see premium on any channel on Rockfin. So rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. Please, everybody, go over there and join. And some of the stuff I do, like I said, I do some stuff on COVID, but it's premium. How about we see what M62259? That sounds like a military machine. Like the Russian has the Terminator tank, the M62259. Let's see what is Scott Ritter's take on rumors of a Polish peacekeeping operation to annex Western Ukraine. I've talked with Scott about that. I've talked with a number of people about that. And so here's what here's what I hear based on everything on my research and different people. It is not unrealistic to think that a good part of what do they call it? Galicia region, probably pronouncing it wrong. That was part of Poland. That at some point the Russians may certainly say that with the Poles, we don't want to, that's you're part of the world. They don't like the Russians over there anyway. You can have that part. So it's a matter of, if the Russians feel, look, right now we feel threatened. The Poles don't come in there, because if you do, we're going to feel that you're coming in there to try to train and equip the Ukrainians. You're coming in there as an offensive force to assist the Ukrainians. They're going to blast the hell out of them with standoff missiles, and it ain't going to be pretty. And if the Poles, keep in mind something, if the Poles come into Western Ukraine, it won't be under the umbrella of NATO. So if they come in under in there, and the Russians smack them hard with standoff missiles, they get hit with a bunch of those hypersonic missiles, and they lose a lot of people, NATO's not coming to their rescue. So I don't think the Poles are coming in. I would be surprised if they did. It's possible, but I think at some point there may be a time when the Russians may work out something with them and say, okay, you can come in and you can take this part now. G-Dog 2K2. Thanks, Garland and Scott. Thanks a lot. G-Dog. And, we got more. We're doing our super chats now. Isabel says, thank you, Isabel. Anything else? We got more. Channeling Tank. There's people doing super stickers. I'm just looking. Are there any questions? Okay, here we go. Sir, just like you, I was a U.S. Marine. I'm so proud of you. You're truly a brave man. Thank you for everything you're doing for us, true hero. That is Scott Ritter. He is a hero. And the thing that's great I like about Scott, and that is he's honest. The man is honest. He's going to tell you what he thinks. Like it or not like it, he's going to tell you what he thinks. He's going to give you, he's not going to be right all the time. He's not going to be wrong all the time. He's been right more often than wrong, but there are a lot of factors. And I think when it was all said and done tonight, after Scott and I talked, it was obvious there are a number of factors. There's issues that the Russians have to be concerned about. There's issues that the West has to be concerned about. And we'll see how these things work out. Any more super chats or super stickers? We're going to look. Also, I have a Patreon page. Here we go. Did we do this one? And any more questions from anyone? Let's see. I don't see any more. I think that's it. There's a super sticker. Good discussion, and hope Scott Ritter comes back soon. Yeah, I'm going to have Scott Ritter back soon. He's going to I'll get Ray McGovern here too in the next few days. I'm still setting up for Saturday. Anything else? I appreciate everyone. Also, we've got some people over on Rockfin, and let's see what anybody said over on Rockfin. I'm not really good with Rockfin, so I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. Russia securing. Zach Boyle says Russia securing water for Crimea is probably extra painful for the people in Flint, Michigan. Now there's no censorship council to protect Flint from this literal violent information. We had better send more money to Ukraine. What they're talking about is this, and this is important. And that is that Flint, Michigan, it takes about $1.5 billion to fix the water problem in Flint, Michigan. The government of the United States is in the process of sending $53 billion to Ukraine. Well, laundering it. Some of it, a little bit of it's probably going to end up in Ukraine over the course of a few months. And they couldn't come up in the last 10 years with $1.5 billion for American citizens in Ukraine. And I think that's a political factor as time goes on. A political factor, a very important political factor, is going to be the issue of people angry in America and throughout Europe, very, very angry, because they're going to be saying, look, man, we don't want our money going over here. You got to do something to fix our problems. What else do we got? Or Rockfin. I wish either one of you great men were my father as a kid. No, because I don't have to pay for you. All right. Well, thanks a lot. I certainly appreciate everybody. Also, don't forget, I've got I have try to get this, figure out what I'm doing. I have a Patreon page. I actually have my website up, so hopefully I'll be able to meet this weekend and start getting stuff up. This is important, everyone. You got to listen to this. It's garlandnixon.com or garlandnixonshow.com or the garlandnixonshow.com. All takes you to my webpage. I don't have anything up yet. We should be meeting this week to start getting stuff up. But here's what I'd like to do. There are a lot of brilliant people in the chat. I can tell by the comments, there are people that are very aware of what's going on, knowledgeable of what's going on. One of the things that I'm going to do, give out my email address. I do that. It's garlandin@gmail.com. But when I get my site up here shortly, completely, you can go look at it. It's just bland right now, blank. But I just had the Garland Nixon show or something. But what I'd like to do is I would like people who are involved in the chat, involved in my Patreon page, involved in Rockfin. I would like to see some people start writing, like a 300-word article and send it to me. And so that my page, yes, I'm going to put my videos up. Yes, I'm going to put links to important stories up and links to videos and important stuff. But I would like to be unique in that I'd like to put a lot of articles up from some of the really smart people in the chat, like Chicken Patty is an example, but some of the really smart people in the chat, some of the really smart, knowledgeable people. I'm sure some of you people can write articles, send it to me, and who knows? I may get some of these articles up, and people, before you know it, you may hear from somebody who says, hey, man, come write for my website. This is great. That's how people get discovered. And there's a lot of smart, knowledgeable people. So when I get my website up, I'm going to put up a specific email address for people to send their articles to me. I'll review it, get back to you, and I'll get it up. And who knows, if people keep contributing, at some point, I'd like to be able to pay, even if it's only $50 or $100 an article. At some point, I'd like to be able to pay people when we put an article up, because that's important to me. I don't think it's good to ask everybody to do everything for free. I'd like to get to a point where we can put articles up, and if you get an article and I'm like, that's a good article, we can actually pay you for an article. How awesome is that? And because people are out here doing the chat thing, doing the super chat, doing tips on Rockfin, etc., that's going to help. That's allowed me to get my site up, allowed me to get, do the things I need to do to get this thing going. So we're going to have a good time. Meanwhile, thanks a lot. At Garland Nixon on Twitter, follow me. Garland.Nixon on Instagram. Just plain old Garland Nixon on Facebook. Keep in mind, I'm suspended for another 6 days. I'm suspended for 16 more days on Facebook and Instagram. They're crap, garbage places anyway. Actually, believe it or not, I'm suspended because I put up an NBC News article about Nazis in Ukraine, and I got suspended for doing that. NBC News isn't suspended, but I am. But at Garland Nixon on Twitter, garlandin@gmail.com. Don't forget, I'm on Telegram, Garland Nixon. I am on Telegram. Follow my Telegram channel. Definitely, you got to follow me on Rockfin, because Scary Poppins and her crew, they may be gone now, but here's what I suspect. I'll tell you what I really suspect before I go. I don't think the idea for a government disinformation board is gone. I just think the mask, the face of it is gone. So I think what they're going to do is say, we're not going to have a formal government disinformation board with a formal leader, but they're still going to do it. In fact, they were already doing it. They were already influencing online. Jen Psaki admitted a while back that they were looking at specific Facebook posts during COVID, and they were contacting Facebook and social media to say, take this post down or that post down, which I think is unconstitutional, but whatever the case. So they're not going to stop doing it. They're just not going to have this lunatic, idiotic cartoon character leading the Ministry of Truth, but they're still going to have the Ministry of Truth. It's just going to be underground. And you know what? In some ways, maybe that's worse. In some ways, maybe it'd be better off if that were there and we could see it. As opposed to, my dad used to always say, I prefer a rattlesnake over a copperhead. A rattlesnake rattles, you can go around him. A copperhead keeps his mouth shut. You walk up to him and he just bites you. So maybe we're better off with the Ministry of Truth than we are with a quiet, clandestine Ministry of Truth. I don't know. At any rate, all 914 people, before you leave, smash, as Alex Christophorus says on one of my favorite YouTube channels, the Duran. I like the Duran. I like Jimmy Dore. I like PTE Politics. That's a good one. A guy named AJ from England. He's hilarious. PTE Geopolitics. Dr. David Walalu, who's got Geopolitics and Conflict, his show. There's a lot of good stuff out there that I enjoy. So at any rate, thanks a lot, everyone. And go to smash the like button, as Alex Christophorus says, and at the Duran, love the Duran. You got to follow Alexander Mercouris. Let me tell you, I met Alexander Mercouris in London, and he is truly as nice a person and as wonderful, him and his wife both. When you listen to him, he seems like a brilliant and a really nice guy. When you meet him in person, he is every bit the quality individual as a human being that he seems to be when you listen to him on the Duran. Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. Smash the like button. Go to my Rockfin channel and make sure you subscribe. And if you can afford the $9.99 a month, I'd appreciate if you become a member. Oh, one more thing. Free Julian Assange. Peace. I'm out.